Good evening, welcome to Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. It's the 25th of March today. Joining me this evening is my old colleague, Chris McCusker, from the Socialist Group of the SNP. So welcome back to you, Chris.
Good evening, Gordon.
Nice to have you back, Chris. I'm going to get started with the coronavirus update first of all. And as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,793,097 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,577,498 have confirmed negative. 215,599 have tested positive. There are 701 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. Not everyone with the virus will display the symptoms, and of course not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 10 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. The number of patients in Scotland who have now died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,572. And this number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 310 were in hospital last night, 32 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 o'clock this morning, 2,285,711 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 263,236 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show that 126,445 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 63 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just in hospitals. And now to tonight's main headlines. Nicola Sturgeon says, put Scotland's recovery in Scotland's hands. Nicola Sturgeon today committed the SNP to an election campaign overflowing with optimism and hope. The First Minister said that now more than ever, experienced leadership was required to protect Scotland. And she said that Scotland's recovery should be in Scotland's hands, not Boris Johnson's. Ms Sturgeon said, on May the 6th, I am asking the people of Scotland to put their trust in me and an SNP government to lead our country through the pandemic and into recovery. Ms Sturgeon went on to say that the people of Scotland will have the right to decide their future in an independence referendum when the COVID crisis is over. So Chris, the First Minister ending her tenure as First Minister at the end of the Parliament with an upbeat message that she intends to lead us out of the pandemic and towards an independence referendum.
Yeah, and only ending it for hopefully 6 weeks, where she'll be re-elected as the First Minister of Scotland, of course. But it is a trifle upbeat, and it's, I think, obviously pragmatic to note that the pandemic, unfortunately, is a bigger issue than independence at this moment in time. But I think the amount of time that we'll have to prepare for independence whilst we're waiting for the pandemic to secede, then I think it will stand us in good stead going forward. So I know it might be a bit disheartening to an awful lot of indie supporters, myself included. I want independence now, tomorrow, yesterday. But I think that we all have to take a big, deep breath and think of the people who have struggled, and actually the tens of thousands of people who have actually lost their lives due to this horrible pandemic.
Indeed, Chris. In past months, in fact, during the whole year of the pandemic, there have been various opinions given about when it will come to an end. But as far as I remember, the scientific view is that when a sufficient number of people have been vaccinated in a country, then the disease will gradually die out by itself. I think 60% vaccination rate is required, if I remember correctly. And Scotland has already gone past the halfway mark. At least half of the population has now been vaccinated.
Yeah, and that'll probably correlate along with the the R number dropping down to about 3 or 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm no scientist; I'm only guessing at that. But you know, the SNP Socialists are actually campaigning for what we term as zero COVID. And although zero COVID is pretty unrealistic given the fact that we've got a common border with England, but basically to suppress the pandemic to its lowest possible form, and hopefully in years to come it will be, you know, unfortunately, something that we just have to be mindful, be wary, and unfortunately have to live with, you know, pretty much like winter flu.
Yeah, indeed. Of course, if you read your history, you'll notice that the parallels between the 1918 flu pandemic, which eventually had, I think it had a second surge as well, which was really large, and now, of course, the seasonal flu, which we inoculate people against now, is actually what's left of that original flu virus. So we have to hope, Chris, I suppose, that the COVID virus behaves in the same way and becomes like the seasonal flu.
Yeah. I think you know it's absolutely correct, Gordon. I couldn't agree more. But you know, I would just really wish, and I get the unrest and the angst. You know, you see it on social media and stuff like that. I had to take myself off of social media last week because it was just overwhelming. It was, you know, it was really affecting my mental health, and. You've just got to say to these people, look, I mean, really think of the bigger picture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
human lives obviously have to take precedence, Chris. Yeah.
And also the fact that you know, you shouldn't run before you can walk. Do you know what I mean? And you know, we came so close in 2014. Let's make sure that we do it right, you know, this time, so that there is no ambiguity, there is no dirty tricks by Westminster and all the rest of it. And, you know, listen, it's not going to be the land of milk and honey. It's going to be a hard graft. You know, and even more so on the back of, you know, coming out of a pandemic. When you've got to think about rebuilding the economy and stuff like that and all the rest of it, you know, let's just, you know, take it easy and let's just get it done.
Okay, Chris, that's fine. Let's leave that subject for the moment. And the UK government has threatened to block a new Scottish child rights bill. The Tories have been blasted for threatening to trample over devolution and block landmark children's rights legislation passed at Holyrood. In a letter to John Swinney, Alistair Jack threatened to overturn the United Nations Convention of Human Rights of the Child, the UN CRC Incorporation Bill, which has been hailed as a real human rights leadership and was passed unanimously by MSPs last week. The Act ensures that all public bodies operating in Scotland have to consider children's rights in all their actions. Scotland became the first country in the United Kingdom and one of only a few nations around the world to pass the landmark legislation. So, Chris, what do you make of this? Why is Alistair Jack trying desperately to put a spanner in the works for something which is so obviously for the benefit of children?
Why? I couldn't possibly comment because I don't think I'd get invited back onto the show. I personally, I think, you know, yeah, great, okay, just do it by all means. Make an arse of yourself, because Scotland will take this to the polling station. They will take it to the booths, and they will vote with their feet. And you know, again, it's a classic case of the Tories not understanding Scotland whatsoever. And if they want to run roughshod over the Scottish government, I think they will find short shrift at the polling stations, Gordon.
Having read Alistair Jack's letter to John Swinney just before the programme, Chris, the government, the British government, is claiming that this bill oversteps a mark in the devolution settlement, and they intend to try and fight that. Do you think that, incorporating the human rights of children, which is, as we all know, is such a good thing to do, should become such a political football in the battle between the United Kingdom and the SNP?
It shouldn't, but they will make it so. It's basically, there's an old Glasgow saying they couldn't see green, but they'd want to lick it. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like, we've done something and they're sort of like, no, that doesn't agree with us. So therefore we're going to take the ball away. And this is so fundamental to the actual values of the citizens of Scotland. And it actually proves the fact that we are an outward and European nation. And they hate that. They absolutely hate that with a passion, and that's why they are rolling around, and trying to overturn this. And make no mistake, people have to remember that this is going to be voted in Westminster on evil laws. That's English vote for English laws. It means that Scotland can't have an actual say in this. Whatsoever. So again, bring it on, Alistair Jack, Viceroy Jack, because Scotland will see exactly what you are, what your modus operandi is, and they will vote with their feet at the polling station.
Chris, just before we leave this subject, do you think perhaps this is Alistair Jack I think testing the water a little bit? He's maybe firing a warning shot in terms of the Scottish Parliament's competence to legislate on areas such as human rights?
I don't actually think so, to be fair, Gordon. I think it is just down to the fact that they are keen to slap Scotland down. They tried to masquerade a ousting of Nicola Sturgeon, and that was all orchestrated, I believe, from Whitehall. And as Nicola quite clearly said, and fantastically said, that she would not be bullied out of office. And I personally believe that the citizens of Scotland will not be bullied out of legislation that's been passed in their name, especially legislation such as this, with regard the obviously children's rights, but more importantly, it's actually more of a human right.
Okay, listen, thank you for that, Chris. And we're going to move on now to the Dunlop Review. Personally, I don't know many people have heard of this, but responding to the publication of the UK government's Dunlop Review, MP Ronnie Cowan, who is a member of the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, said, "This long-delayed review confirms only one thing, that Scotland doesn't need Tory tinkering with the Constitution. We need independence." The report, which has only just been published, was commissioned by Theresa May when she was Prime Minister in 2019 and was submitted to the UK government later that year. Mr. Cowan described the report as being just outdated half measures which would do nothing to address the simple fact that Boris Johnson's Tory government has repeatedly ridden roughshod over Scotland. Mr. Cowan, the SNP MP for Inverclyde, said that the UK government was hammering the Scottish economy with a hard Brexit, stripping powers from the Scottish Parliament, undermining devolution and threatening to sign away our NHS in damaging trade deals. So this report, Chris, is a UK government report commissioned by Theresa May. But I don't think anybody in Scotland has really ever heard of this. What was the purpose of it? Do you know?
Basically, the purpose, again, going back to the last story, is basically in order to slap Scotland down and make them accept anything that is rolled out by Westminster. And actually, Mike Russell said that the Dunlop Review shows that the UK government are intent in undermining devolution. itself,
Yep.
Not just undermining the Scottish Parliament, but the whole
The
ethos
Devolution
of
Act itself, Chris.
devolution. Yeah, and it's got ramifications. Obviously, it would have ramifications, obviously, for Wales as well. And we all know that Northern Ireland will get special treatment and whatnot, what have you, due to their situation. And plenty's been said on that. But again, it is just Whitehall, pulling on their jackboots and and just walking all over Scotland and basically reducing Holyrood to no more than a talking shop. That's ideally Westminster's aim, I firmly believe.
So would you say, Chris, it's fair to say that in your view anyway, that the British government has a multi-pronged attack going on against the SNP and the previous Scottish government to undermine devolution, to legislate, to override or sidestep Holyrood when it comes to making investments and handing out money to local authorities, and as well, as you're pointing out here, riding roughshod or actually trying to traduce or reduce the effect of the devolution settlement? Yeah,
because I mean, basically, just say for argument's sake, I mean, something really, really silly like a small bridge over a river. Let's just say the Brigadoon in Ayrshire,
okay,
right? And it needs retarmac or it needs made over and stuff like that. They can stick a Union Jack on that and say, "We done that."
Provided by the UK government.
Provided by the UK Union, by the benefits of the strong shoulders, whatnot and what have you. Whereas at the moment, the money gets given to the Scottish government and the block grant, and the Scottish government there, sit on that money, and then Ayrshire or Doon Carrick Council turn into the Scottish government and say, "Oh, here, look, there's something wrong with that bridge. You need to give us money so that we can fix it." That's fine, great. So if the viewers think back on taking a car journey, and I know it's a long time since we've taken a car journey up through Scotland, but on the roads you'll see signs and it says funded by the European Union.
Yeah, or the Scottish government and the European Union, yes.
In partnership with the Scottish government, they'll be replaced. And it will be, a massive big butcher's apron on it, and it will be no reference to the Scottish government whatsoever. And it's basically to portray to the Scottish people that it's done by the benevolence of the UK government. That's it. That word, benevolence. Well, and it basically reduces Scotland to a vassal state.
It is, yeah. That makes us into a colony, I suppose, Chris. Anyway, Chris, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. We'll need to move on, unfortunately. But the next story is more of a good news story this time. NHS Scotland staff are offered a 4% pay rise. The Scottish Government has offered a substantial pay rise to NHS Scotland Agenda for Change staff. If accepted by staff, this deal will be the most generous National Health Service pay uplift anywhere in the UK and would represent the biggest single-year increase in pay for NHS staff since devolution. The pay rises will benefit 154,000 NHS Agenda for Change employees, including nurses, paramedics, allied health professionals, as well as domestic healthcare support staff, porters and other frontline health workers. The pay rise would ensure that staff on pay bands from 1 to 7 would receive at least a 4% pay rise compared with 2020 and 2021, with the staff who earned less than £25,000 in 2020 getting a guaranteed minimum increase of over £1,000 in 2021-2022. This means that staff on the lowest Agenda for Change pay point would get a 5.4% increase. Those on the highest pay points will receive uplifts of £800. While pay increases are usually effective from the 1st of April, the 2021-22 pay settlement will be backdated to the 1st of December 2020 in recognition of an exceptional year of significant pressure for staff. This follows on the £500 thank you payment for health and social care workers. Now, Chris, the Tories are famous for trying to say that the SNP has not been doing its day job, but clearly the SNP government over the past 12 months has been doing its day job, and this is further evidence of this, isn't it?
Well, again, it's also not only further evidence of it doing the day job, but also cooperating with the trade unions and with the staff as well in recognition of the fantastic work that our NHS has done over the pandemic. And make no mistake, if we didn't have a pandemic, I think that they would still deserve it because, yes, the NHS is absolutely second to none. But it's interesting to hear. There was a presenter on Sky News who was actually trying to portray this as obviously an SNP bad story. By basically saying, well, Scotland can afford to do this because there's fewer people in Scotland and the NHS is so much smaller. By that reckoning, then, if Wales is half the size of Scotland, Welsh Labour would be able to offer their NHS staff an 8% increase.
Yeah, so it makes no sense, does it?
It really doesn't. No. But again, as I say, it will be portrayed as an SNP bad story.
Yeah.
And the propaganda machine of the British media will, constantly use it to hit Nicola Sturgeon over the head with a big, Galby stick.
Chris,
because this announcement came out 1 minute before 12 o'clock last night, just before we went into the election period.
Yeah, Chris, just before we go any further and before we leave the subject, there's one question I wanted to ask you, Chris, and that is that the pandemic seems to have focused people's attention a lot more on the very low-paid workers who do the vast amount of work in social care, domestic service, porters. All of these people have traditionally been forgotten about, haven't they, in terms of pay rises? Do you think that the pandemic has helped to focus our government's attention on where the pay rises really need to be made?
Well, yeah, and you make an excellent point, Gordon, because a capitalist society puts value stock in people that work in a bank and people who do IT work and high tech computer work and stuff like that. And the reverse psychology is, and we've seen it throughout the pandemic, is the fact that the country cannot operate without porters, without cleaners, without people picking up rubbish in the street. So everybody has got a value in life, and unfortunately, what you're witnessing is the fact that the Tories only value life that actually offers them a financial return, and the menial tasks that need done on a day-to-day basis. If the Tories had their way, London would replicate London of the 17th century when there was dysentery in the streets and rubbish and black cobbled roads and whatnot, and what have you. I'm sure that would go down well with Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Well, listen, Chris, we'll need to leave that story on Jacob Rees-Mogg for the time being. We're going to stay in Scotland for our next story, and the Glasgow City Council is to vote on an end to fossil fuel investments. Today saw the publication of a motion by the Scottish Green Party councillors in Glasgow for the council to commit to ending its pension fund investments in fossil fuels. At present, the Strathclyde Pension Fund, which the GCC is part of, has over £500 million worth of holdings in fossil fuel companies. The motion is part of a budget agreement between the SNP administration, the Scottish Green Party, and so it's expected to pass with overwhelming support when the vote takes place on April the 1st. Now, Chris, this is a big step forward for Glasgow City Council, and Speaking myself as a Strathclyde regional pensioner myself, I'm delighted to hear that my pension money is not going to be put into any more fossil fuel companies.
Yeah, and it's long overdue, and hopefully that money will get directed into more ethical funding, and under the last Labour administration, so many projects and stuff like that were funded by, you know, dubious means, shall we say, and stuff like that, and unethical savings, and an awful lot was obviously put into the buildings in Glasgow.
Yeah.
But hopefully that this will see a sea change of opinion, that that we can actually do things differently. More recently, I've seen the stock of the first bus have been promoting a lot of green energy buses.
Of course, yes. It was just announced a huge fund to replace 315 buses last week.
Yeah, and I hugely welcome that. Whilst I would welcome a study into bringing back the trams in Glasgow and stuff like that. I think that would be a boon.
Idea.
Oh no, I really think that would be a boon for Glasgow. In the most greenest of energy ever possible. Why we ever get rid of them, God only knows. But yeah, it's definitely a step forward, and it just shows what can be achieved actually when a progressive council can actually find a good working relationship in order to get policy through.
Of course, this is a partnership, Chris, isn't it, between the SNP Majority Council and support from the Green councillors as well. And I think possibly that this is a reflection of a broader cooperation in Holyrood, isn't it, between the Greens and the SNP on many other issues.
Well, yeah, and I only wish that Labour would possibly take a note out of the Green book, because if it is to be as is reported that Scottish Labour might actually edge the Tories into third place and become the party of opposition, they would need to, be able to work with the Scottish Government in order to get things done for Scotland.
Yeah.
There is no point in fighting against the controlling Scottish Government majority between, the SNP and the Greens, because that is just not a vote winner in any such way, shape or form. So Anna Salwar really needs to, radically change that party. And get them to actually work for Scotland, and in a progressive and pragmatic manner.
Well, we can only hope, Chris. We're going to move on now to news of something completely different. And this is news of a new bill to ban dual mandates in Westminster. SNP MP and former MEP Alan Smith today presented a bill in the House of Commons which will ban dual mandates in Westminster, forcing Douglas Ross to resign as an MP before seeking election in the Scottish Parliament and saving the Scottish taxpayer £175,000. The Scottish Tory leader hopes to return to Holyrood in May's elections after being placed top of the Tories' Highlands and Islands regional list. Mr. Smith, urged Ross to step down to save the taxpayer the £170,000 cost of holding a separate by-election. The SNP has claimed it's untenable for Ross to continue as an MP if elected as an MSP, given the big issues facing the people of Moray. If elected, the MP for Moray would hold 4 jobs as an MSP, an MP, the leader of the Scottish Tory Party, and a football linesman. SNP candidate Neil Gray is standing down as the MP for Airdrie and Shotts before the Holyrood election. Alan Smith automatically stood down as an MEP on his election to the UK Parliament. Now, this is an interesting one, Chris, isn't it? the the Scottish, I was going to say the Scottish National Party, but the Scottish government has always had this position, hasn't it, that people have to step down from, say, a Westminster MP job before they can be put up for election here in Scotland. Surely this is just common sense.
Well, of course it's common sense because there's no way in the world. The whole idea of one person holding four jobs and basically being able to be in four places at the one time. It's been well documented the fact that Douglas Ross has missed quite a few important debates and votes at Westminster because of his part-time job as a linesman.
Yes.
He famously went over to officiate at a Spanish game, and there was an important vote there. Predominantly football happens at the weekend and whatnot, what have you, but it has been seen on a Wednesday night running the line. Personally, to my mind, if you're taking an elected office, then you're there to serve the constituents, and I fail to see how you can serve the constituents running the lines in a football match.
Also, I was going to say, Chris, it also seems excessively greedy as well to be taking maybe 3 or 4 different salaries at once for doing basically 4 jobs badly.
They're not called the self-servitives for nothing. But the point that I was going to make is that it's interesting that he's no longer, he's not standing in the constituency surrounding Aberdeen and Moray and all the rest of it. Because I think that would be a hard sell to the people of Moray and Aberdeen. Given his woeful ineptitude over the whole Brexit debacle, what's happened to the people at Peterhead and things like that.
Yep.
With regards to fishing. So, to be parachuted in to another seat in order to, squeeze through the back door like Murdo Fraser on the list vote, it would be interesting to see if he doesn't get elected, what direction would the Scottish Tories go in, and in that case.
How are they? How are they going to have a Scottish Tory leader who isn't actually an elected politician?
Well, and not only that. I mean, I think there's 2 deputy leaders. Yep. They must be absolutely pig sick of the fact that constantly getting looked over. At least Jackie Bailey, stood up to the plate and fell on her face fantastically, right enough in doing it. But at least she sort of stood in and sort of steered the ship, however ridiculous Scottish Labour is. But it's. Again, it's something that you have to be questioning the constituents as to, what prime time can that one person serve to your community if he's also serving, the constituents of Moray at the same time.
What is the old phrase, Chris? A man cannot serve 2 masters.
Indeed. And there's also another old phrase that a man's got to know his limitations.
Okay. Chris, we have to leave that story there, sadly, and move on, I'm afraid. This time we're moving to Belarus, as dozens of people have been detained as Belarus marks Freedom Day. In Belarus today, security forces detained dozens of people as protesters answered a call by opposition figures to ramp up demonstrations against veteran President Alexander Lukashenko to pressure him to resign. The rights group, Vyazna 96, that's Spring 96 in English, said at least 45 people had been detained, while footage circulated by local media showed isolated incidents of protesters being grabbed or chased down the street by police. The authorities had moved police buses, water cannon and prisoner vans into the centre of the capital, Minsk, in anticipation of the protests on the country's unofficial Freedom Day. Protesters carrying the traditional red and white Belarusian flags marched through the streets while cars honked their horns in solidarity. Lukashenko has faced the biggest challenge to his nearly 27-year rule since protesters took to the streets after he declared himself the winner of a presidential election last August, which opposition said was rigged. Now, when I read this at first, Chris, I was struck by the sheer irony of the headline that on the protesters' Freedom Day, they were being arrested. The people of Belarus have put up with a lot, haven't they? They're showing tremendous forbearance to carry on this protest.
Well, yeah, and it's again, it's there's actually echoes of what happened in Bristol, in a very small way, of course, Bristol. But the authorities in Belarus have indicated clearly that that they are prepared to do anything and everything in order to letting the Freedom Day be turned into a violent protest. But it's it's they're the ones that are actually deeming what is violent and what is not.
Well, Chris, I think you could certainly say that the Belarusian police have gone equipped, haven't they? Because I mean, you don't go to police. You don't go to police a peaceful protest armed with water cannons and arrest buses, do you?
No, you don't, and that's why I mentioned Bristol.
Of course, it's a people's protest, Chris, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. But when I mentioned the similarities between that and the protest in Bristol, is the fact that Bristol started out a very, very peaceful protest, and still the police started to kettle people and started, making it more ugly than what it actually was. What these people are doing, what the authorities are doing in Belarus, is the fact that they're actually given their police the authority to go out there and be as thuggish and as violent as possible in order to suppress people actually exercising their democratic will in order to, simply just have a march.
It's just basically a campaign of intimidation against the people, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it is out and out authoritarianism, which basically says it's either our way or the highway, and it shows scant regard for the people's actual choice, and that is what happens when you live in a despotic society.
Well, I was going to say, Chris, we have to hope that the Belarusians manage to prevail and force Lukashenko out and hopefully replace him with somebody who is democratically voted in.
Well, what we also have to hope as well is the fact that they can garner support from the wider community of Europe, in order to actually, keep an eye on this, because people like Lukashenko have got scant regard for any other authority bar their own. Yep. And when that authority is, used to the detriment of the people, then, there's only so much that the people can actually do. It's all very well in saying, that I've got solidarity for my neighbour and whatnot and what have you. But at the end of the day, they still need support from like-minded Europhiles who, are sympathetic to the plight that the people are going through.
Yeah, okay, Chris. Well, listen, I'm sorry, but we'll have to leave that subject for the moment and move on now, this time to the United States. And the US pledges to slash solar energy costs by 60% in a decade. The Biden administration today set a goal to cut the cost of solar energy by 60% over the next decade as part of an ambitious plan to decarbonise the United States power sector by 2035. The US Department of Energy said the goal accelerates its previous utility-scale solar cost target by 5 years. For the US power grid to run entirely on clean energy within 15 years, a key pillar of President Joe Biden's climate change agenda, solar energy will need to be installed at as much as 5 times faster than it is today, the DOE has said. To get there, the agency committed to spending $128 million on technologies, including perovskite solar cells, which are regarded as promising a cheap alternative to the silicon cells that dominate the market. Funds will also support research on cadmium telluride and on concentrating solar technologies. Part of the funding will also seek to extend the lifetime of existing photovoltaic solar plants by improving components like inverters, cables and racks. So, Chris, this is a big change, isn't it, from the Trump administration, which was very much for coal and oil and old technologies, and a change to the new and the clean technologies of the future. So Biden's certainly stamping his authority now on the whole climate change issue in America.
Definitely. We've seen since the 1900s, America has been one of the biggest oil producers, what Biden has clearly done is he has signalled to before, obviously, the COP26, he's actually signalled his intention in order to turn things around in the American economy. And going back to the story that we discussed about the Glasgow Council, is actually distancing themselves away from the fossil fuel industry. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, further down the line and stuff like that. Because I mean, America is a heavy user of fossil fuel. You only need to look at the amount of
it's a car-based economy, isn't it, Chris?
Well, yeah, you look back at the car production in Detroit and all the rest of it, and the cars in America are twice the size as the bloody cars in Scotland. I think it's probably something that Barack Obama would have possibly considered, but it takes, obviously, again, I use the word pragmatic, but it takes somebody like Biden to actually take a pragmatic view and say, no, we've had enough of the use of the fossil fuels, and we need to start changing it now, because obviously he has to meet his own targets that he's set for COP26.
Okay, Chris. Well, listen, thank you for that. Hopefully America will have restored much of its reputation in terms of climate change by doing this. Anyway, it's time to move on now, this time to Egypt, and it's feared that the Suez Canal could be blocked for weeks. A container ship blocking the Suez Canal may take weeks to set free, according to the salvage company, as officials stopped all ships entering the channel on Thursday in a new setback for global trade. The 400-metre-long Ever Given is blocking transit in both directions through one of the world's busiest shipping channels for oil and grain and other trades linking Asia and Europe. The Suez Canal Authority said that 8 tugs were working to move the vessel, which got stuck diagonally across the single-lane southern stretch of the canal on Tuesday morning amid high winds and a dust storm. We can't exclude it might take weeks depending on the situation. Peter Berdowski, the CEO of Dutch company Boskalis, which is trying to free the ship, told the Dutch television programme Nieuwsveer. A total of 206 large container ships, tankers carrying oil and gas, and bulk vessels hauling grain have backed up at either end of the canal, according to tracking data, creating one of the worst shipping jams ever seen. Chris, this is an incredible story. This ship, which is almost half a kilometre long, seems to have got itself wedged across the canal. I don't think this has happened in the canal's history, but then again, ships weren't this size when the canal was built, were they?
Well, no, they weren't. That's a very, very valid point. Actually, I would love to be able to speak to my young cousin. He is a second in command, just one off of a ship's captain, and he's just recently, a couple of weeks ago, he's been sent out to India to pick up a cargo ship and take it up to Russia.
Would he have to go through the Suez Canal for that, Chris, I guess?
I would presume.
Yeah.
I have got no idea. I mean, he's obviously far more knowledgeable in these facts. But see, when you're actually talking about it like that, I have to go to India in order to pick up a ship and take it up to Russia. It's like, I have to go to Arnold Clark and pick up a car and take it over to Annie's land. That is how matter-of-factly that he speaks. Yeah. He's actually told me that there is some parts in the Suez Canal that literally you have got inches either side, of manoeuvrability. Now, ships these days are obviously computer driven, 98% computer driven. Everything's go, thing. But I mean, obviously, you can never factor in the force of nature. So, and I did actually hear this morning that they partially floated the ship.
I think the problem is it's stuck tight with the stern stuck on one side of the canal and the bow stuck on the other, Chris, and that's the problem.
The last thing that I heard was that they managed to sort of like partially float it, but obviously not being able to free it up. But yeah, it's one of those weird and wonderful stories of the.
It certainly is. Yeah. Anyway, Chris, I'm afraid we can't spend any more time on this fascinating story. We have to move on. And a majority, apparently, will still vote for an independent Scotland within the EU. A majority, 53% of voters, say they will vote for an independent Scotland within the EU, according to a new poll. The Survation poll, published in the Press and Journal, also puts the SNP on course for a Holyrood majority in the upcoming election, with the Tories now trailing behind Labour. Earlier this week, a poll for BMG Research found a 52% majority in support of Scottish independence, and a vast majority of Scots, 57% in fact, who think that First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has handled the corona pandemic well, compared to just 24% for Boris Johnson. Now, Chris, a lot of people had been saying that support for independence had taken a bit of a hit during the so-called Salmongate affair. But this new poll, in fact, I think two new polls, have shown a recovery in the vote, haven't they? And we're starting to see the bounce back now.
Well, we're starting to see the bounce back, and I'm seeing people on my Twitter feed saying, I've just joined the SNP and whatnot, what have you. And I'm hearing anecdotal reports of branch memberships going up by 150, and whatnot, and what have you. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, despite the Salmongate thing and all the rest of it, in the round, as I was, talking earlier about the NHS, the handling of the pandemic, I think, has been magnificently done by not just Nicola, because I will actually chip in, and Jean Freeman has played an absolute blinder.
So she is the health secretary, Chris, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, Jean, I would like to say a very, very good friend of mine. And she, for her last year, God, this has been a hell of a last year as an MSP.
It certainly has.
But I mean, knowing Jean, she wouldn't have wanted it any other way. She done wonders with the Social Security when she was the minister in charge of that. and set us on a good path, to actually build our social security powers. I think she's done an amazing work in her remit as health secretary. And I honestly, I struggle to think what other leader could have done better. Because you have the Scottish Tories, who are clearly the lapdogs for the English Tories. Boris Johnson. So they would have followed his lead to the letter. I firmly believe that Scotland would have been in a far worse state in terms of deaths had we been following that. Scottish Labour.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned earlier on there about the way that the Scottish Government has handled the pandemic, but it's not just about the health of people in the pandemic, is it, either? Because they have put in place millions and millions of pounds of basically tax money to help people through the pandemic, not just with their own health, but with their jobs, with money for bills, help for the low paid, help for people in rented accommodation. The list goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah. The list does go on, Gordon, and you're quite right to point that out. But also it's worth to point out, whilst we're doing so, is the fact that the Scottish Government have actually dug into reserves and gone beyond what the UK government has given us in Barnett consequentials, and and various one-off payments and stuff like that, in order to replicate the payments that were made down in England and Wales. But for by that, you only have to look at the announcement last week of 500 extra mental health staff.
Yes.
Because the mental health issue, which runs alongside the pandemic, people being in sometimes complete isolation is obviously going to affect their mental health. And the Scottish Government having the foresight to actually say that is an area that we need to beef up. So I mean, from that point of view, that's obviously ongoing investment that the Scottish Government are making. And not only that, there's also the investment in the extra teachers as well, and the extra payments that the Scottish Government have made to unpaid carers. As well as all the other ad hoc payments that they've made in order to upkeep the infrastructure.
Chris, of course, the First Minister, before she left Holyrood for the last time, said that she was going to enter the election campaign on a pledge to lead Scotland out of the pandemic. And bearing in mind that this poll, if we just return to it for a moment, is showing that support for the Tories has now fallen behind Labour, do you feel now that Nicola Sturgeon's fight back against the Tories is now on the front foot? The Tories have shot their bolt now, and it's everything to play for the elections.
Well, but I'll quickly point out that Nicola Sturgeon has not left the Scottish Parliament for the last time.
Well, I mean, before the election, Chris. I apologise for not making that clear.
I've got every confidence that she will be returned.
That was a slip of the tongue.
Carry on the great work that she's doing. But you are quite right. The Tories have thrown everything at the Scottish Government, including the kitchen sink, and it's not worked. You only have to look back at the when the Tories made up their mind before Nicola Sturgeon actually gave her 8 hours worth of evidence. And that is when they actually tabled the motion of no confidence. before Nicola had actually given her evidence. So they clearly made up their mind that this was, one way that they were going to try and trip up the First Minister. So it's all to do with party politics, and it's just another ruse that the Tories will use because they have nothing to offer Scotland.
Chris, before the show ends this afternoon, or this evening, I should say, there's one other question I wanted to put to you, and that is, do you think that there will be a referendum this September?
You're putting me on the spot.
What do you think?
I actually believe that Mike Russell said 6 months, so I think 6 months up might be around about November. I think it's a long stretch of the imagination, to be honest with you. But if it's achievable, I think they will do it. But I think, as I said at the start of the show, we need to be able to walk before we can run, Gordon. And if the First Minister says that it's going to be May next year, then as a number one comrade, I will take that and I will hold her to it.
Well, let's hope it's before that, Chris, and you never know. Mike Russell did say 6 months, but that was said was best practice. I think the minimum is 4 months, so you never know. Anyway, on that optimistic note, we have run out of time, and of course, I just need to remind you that we are having a major crowdfunder at the moment here at Broadcasting Scotland. So if you want to become a regular supporter of Broadcasting Scotland or make an individual donation or volunteer, you can do that by following directions at the bottom of your screen now. But just beholden on me now to thank my guest, Chris McCusker, as usual, for being such a terrific guest. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Gordon.
And from all of us here at the studio this evening, a very good night to you.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.